Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Paul Rocchio, and yes, that's a pre-COVID picture of myself, so I do apologize for the way I look today. I'm with the Franchise Association. Today's presentation is part of IFA's 2021 Economic Outlook webinar series based around the newly released 2021 Economic Outlook on Franchising report. And we'll focus today specifically on the personal services sector and particularly health and beauty brands. Two quick notes before we get started. We are recording today's webinar and it will be made available to IFA members later this evening on our microsite community.franchise.org. And if you have any questions during today's session, please use the question box and the panelists will address the question towards the end of today's webinar. We're going to leave 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So today's purpose is to give you an overview of the report findings for the personal services sector, and then you'll hear from your peers within this sector on where they see the franchising economy going. So for a high-level overview of the full report, you can view the recording of our May 18th series kickoff webinar at community.franchise.org. Again, that's our microsite. But here are a few of the key points to note in the FranData findings. So FranData predicts that by year end, franchising will have recovered to nearly 2019 levels in most metrics: business growth, employment, economic outlook, and contribution to GDP. Franchising is expected to experience the highest upswing of franchise sales since the last recession this year. And then specifically for the personal services sector, while still below the pre-pandemic levels, franchise establishments in this sector are expected to grow by 3.5% in 2021 to almost 114,000 establishments. Franchise employment in this sector is projected to increase, adding more than 101,000 jobs, a growth rate of 10%. Finally, this sector is expected to increase their economic output by 37.7% over 2020 numbers to a total of almost $36 billion. These are great predictions for this sector and a lot to kind of work towards and look forward to. So on that note, I'd like to introduce this awesome panel today. So we have Edward Logan, the CEO of Sport Clips, Meg Roberts, the CEO and president of The Lash Lounge, Mr. John Tezza, president and chief development officer for Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa, and Angela Jaskowski, COO of Self Esteem Brands. So we have an awesome panel. Looking forward to this. So on that note, John, let me turn things over to you. Please take it away, buddy.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. And before we get too far into it, I just want to say thank you to this great panel for participating. Just for context sake, just to set the table a little bit, we're going to talk for about 40 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes of the program is designed to be answering questions that come from the 100 or so attendees. So please, along the way, feel free to put in the chat box or the chat function some questions. If you don't, we're going to spend the last 20 minutes of this program talking about our favorite movies, and Meg's going to sing. So it's probably not a great use of your time if you don't have some good questions in there. So somehow I got elected to be the moderator of this, which gives me the unique privilege of getting to back cleanup on all the questions so that I don't have to answer them if I don't want to. So what we'll do is we've got a handful of questions we're going to start with. Meg, why don't we start with you? Just a quick introduction of you and your brand, and then we'll kind of move around.
Sure. Thanks, John. I think he's making me go first because he didn't show up for the prep meeting and therefore he's the moderator. My name is Meg Roberts. I'm the CEO of The Lash Lounge as well as the Chief Marketing Officer of Franworth here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've been in franchising about 15 years now and happy to kind of be in this reemergence phase with everybody. Really looking forward to talking about the great things that are happening in the personal service sector because good news. So thanks.
Thanks, Meg. Angela, you want to go next?
Absolutely. So I'm Angela Jaskolski, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Self-Esteem Brands. So we are the parent company for Anytime Fitness, for Waxing the City, Base Camp Fitness, and the Bar Method. And I have spent most of my career in the beauty industry, so I'm really actually excited to talk about fitness as I am to hear from my peers here about the beauty sector.
Okay, Edward.
Hi, Edward Logan with Sport Clips Haircuts. We are focused on men and boys haircuts, all 50 states in Canada, about 1,850 locations. Obviously, we were completely shut down for good portions of last year, but this year is starting off really well, seeing some great trends in general data, but also our specific data, and really excited to talk about the future for so many obvious reasons, but also, specifically today with you, today here with you.
All right, thank you. And I'm John Tez. I'm the President and Chief Development Officer for Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa. We're a 500-unit chain of nearly 500 units across North America. And like the rest of the panelists, just really excited to be here and to be in this kind of re-emergent phase that we've all been so looking forward to. So first question, and jump ball, anybody can take it. Kind of what's your personal view or your brand's view on the economic outlook for the personal services sector?
So I can jump in and address fitness to start. It maybe is a little obvious, but health care and personal wellness is a big part of the conversation right now, and never before has it been more important, I guess, than it is today. And that's a very good thing. It's staggering to read reports about what's happened with people since the pandemic started. Healthy people and people with underlying conditions alike have reduced their physical activity by more than 50%. And so from my perspective, and our perspective, that really is, it would suggest that those two things together, that there's a really even a greater need for fitness, if you will, and health and wellness in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And because it's so much a part of the conversation right now, hopefully what we're going to start to see is it getting the attention that it deserves, and perhaps we'll start to see a shift in our government and how they are investing in healthcare and wellness.
I'll pile on that one with Angela's discussion about kind of mental health and physical health. I think, what we learned during this pandemic, so many things about our own personal constitution. How can we stay strong during times that were very unprecedented? And I think as we bounce back in the personal care service or sector, whether it's beauty or fitness, there's a mental health component to all of that. And certainly the idea of being able to get out and exercise, rejoin your group fitness friends is hugely important to mental and physical health. And likewise in the personal care sector, that outlet that you have when you go into your beauty salon or your massage parlor, in our case, in to take our little lash nap and chat with our stylist, is something that people are really eager to get back to and to sort of rejoin the conversation with others. So we're extremely optimistic, and all the measures are pointing in the right direction right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really nice to have Angela in here, because I think they're also connected, right? People weren't going back to gyms, they weren't going out to eat, and that connects directly, in our case, to haircuts and whatever other personal services sectors. People's behavior and getting that concept of getting back to normal, even though I think we all agree it'll be a new normal and some things will never quite return the way they were. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities in that as well, which is a whole conversation in and of itself. But for us, we feel like we're really just a reflection of all the other activities people are or aren't doing. And we're seeing really good trends and expect to continue to, as people are working out more, going out to eat more, going to events, more comfortable, obviously, in those environments. Our business seems to directly reflect any poll or any other trends that you see like that. And these things are also interrelated. So I think there's, for me, I'm hearing, almost universal optimism with a few exceptions and certain industries, but almost universal optimism. We really share that.
Yep. Yeah, and no surprise to hear that we share the same sentiment. Taking just a little bit more of a macro view or a longer term view, one of the things that we're really bullish about is the fact that really, I mean, ours, but really most of the personal services sector, the edge services are delivered on site, and they're typically delivered by a licensed professional, or at the very least a human being, right? And so as you think about the broader trends that are affecting retail, multi-unit retail, and the broader consumer businesses, we feel like we're really well positioned to capitalize on that long term and to avoid some of the disruption that's happening elsewhere. And then, of course, right, we feel like what has been incredible headwinds over the last 12 months are now shifting significantly to be tailwinds, as the consumer really, not only do they want to get back to some of their pre-pandemic behaviors, but they also feel the need to experience some of the things that they really enjoyed pre-pandemic that they've not been able to enjoy during this last 12 months. You know, we certainly see that in our massage business. You know, as you think about sort of the natural stressors that this last 12 months have caused. But ironically, we really see it in our skincare business, where, you know, the last 12 months, people have seen themselves at a much greater frequency, and quite frankly, at a much greater depth than they have before. And so, you know, we really see that as a boon to our business. Now, the flip side of that, both from a long-term perspective and a short-term perspective, is that while the consumer demand is, you know, the latent consumer demand is almost unfettered, we are seeing some headwinds as it relates to practitioner availability. And, you know, there's both a short-term and a long-term component to that. There's people that have left these industries over the last 12 months because of the tenuous nature of them. But then there's also, you know, we're almost wooing two types of consumers, or two types of constituencies back to the business. We're wooing our consumers, but we're also wooing our practitioners. So thanks. I think great perspective all around. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to add to that, John, because I think you hit on something that's so important in the industry of franchising in general as a community, but also in the personal care industry, and that is the word personal, right? What we do is a personal service, whether it's a fitness instructor encouraging you, or someone that you're chatting with and you've got to know really well in your lash salon. The key element there is a relationship. And I think, you know, the thing that people missed most that was evident during this pandemic was their ability to directly relate and connect to other human beings. I mean, we are pack animals. We need other people. So it gives you that long-term vision to recognize that sometimes when things can be automated, they don't need to be automated. Sometimes you really want to re-embrace that human engagement, and that's something that we're certainly seeing in our services. And it sounds like the rest of the panel is as well.
Yeah, I made that note as well. There's a phrase that we've actually used in the past, not pre-pandemic, but I think is going to be even more amplified and more relevant over the next several years as we come out of it to the new normal, and that is the concept of high tech, high touch, right? And everybody talks about technology. It's probably, you know, more exciting to the average consumer or more accessible to the average business. But I think the personal services segment has a unique advantage as we go into the new normal, that everybody's been high tech, high tech, high tech, but there's been a lack of that high touch, right? Less social, less interpersonal. And I think that really plays to our advantage. Obviously, we can't overlook technology, but we have that unique advantage of being, by definition, personal services is very interpersonal. Most of our labor is very interpersonal. Most of our clients enjoy that interpersonal touch. And so that concept of high tech, high touch, I think is going to be really relevant. I think people, you know, consumers in general, but also the workforce. And I know we'll talk about that. That'll be a big part of the conversation, I'm sure. But people miss the past activities that they used to enjoy. And I think we're really going to see people indulging in small luxuries, especially those where they get some of that interaction they've been missing.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I have my first massage scheduled for tomorrow night in over a year, and I'm very much, so to your point, John, I'm very much looking forward to that. In the fitness business, I think everyone's a little concerned about the role that digital fitness is going to play moving forward. And quite honestly, I think that digital fitness is here to stay. And I'm a person who believes that digital and bricks and mortar, that experience can serve one another. Actually, they can coexist and actually deliver a better experience for the consumer. So, maybe in fitness a little more so even than in the beauty services, I think that it is going to be a hybrid experience that is in front of us. And it's not just as simple as saying, I'm going to continue to offer digital services. It is really curating and designing those experiences so they're serving one another. We're a franchise brand, we're a bricks and mortar business that is going to need to continue to innovate in our digital experience and ensure that that serves our consumers and all stakeholders, franchisees, consumers, and everyone.
Yeah,
I think
that's great.
the interaction piece, Angela, does make it the same though, because what you're doing in fitness now, even though it's digital, it's interactive. So it's not the old Jane Fonda tape in the VCR, right? Where you're seeing the same thing over and over again. So you are still providing that connection, and the better the concept or the business is at making that connection feel and be real, the more those two things coexist so beautifully.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I think it's about augmentation, not necessarily replacement, right?
Yeah, I think my opinion of organizations that are going to do better over the next few years, not that you don't react to the short-term spikes, right? That was pretty exaggerated last year, but you take the short-term spikes and trends in context of what's going to happen over time. You know for a fact the world's not going to get lower tech. So let's go ahead and own that. And how do we apply that to personal services and other segments in a way that coexists? I think it's a great point.
Yeah. So we're going to jump into kind of pre-post and the implications on the operating environment. But before we do that, it might be helpful if we all go around and give maybe the 90-second version of your brand's or your primary brand's journey over the last 12 months. Sort of just pre, intra, and then, how the brand has recovered. Edward, do you want to start?
Sure. Ours was quite the roller coaster. So you're going to start out with one of the more dramatic stories, probably. I know there are a lot of them out there, though. March 15th, January and February were record Januaries and Februaries for us. Everything was hitting on all cylinders. I know that's the case for a lot of organizations as well. March 15th, we had 1,863 open and operating locations. I believe it was April 4th or 5th, we had 0. Almost exclusively by government mandate. There were a handful in a couple states that never completely technically shut down, but very few. And so that was obviously fairly dramatic. What we did to deal with that is we got the team together, first internal, of course, first our leadership team, and we set kind of some guardrails, so to speak, or I believe we called them pillars at the time. It doesn't matter what you call them, but some principles to guide us through decisions. We knew a lot of unknowns would exist for a long time, and a lot of tough decisions would be coming at us quickly. So what principles were we going to stay true to help make each one of those decisions a little bit easier, a little bit faster, and a little bit more successful? Those pillars for us were one, we've always been very much values and a culture organization. It's very core to who we are. And so we said, first and foremost, we're going to maintain our integrity as an organization, no matter what happens. So always act with our internal stated values first and foremost, as long as we survived this period, which we came in very strong and handled things, weathered it pretty well. But the worst thing that could happen is we literally survived, but we weren't really ourselves anymore. So we really put that first. And then we put franchisee continuity, right? Store level continuity first and foremost is one of those couple pillars. And that caused us to make decisions like we have a handful of company-owned locations. We shut those down before we had to so we could focus on making good decisions for the franchisees instead of trying to balance both pieces. It caused us to offer fee relief, royalty relief, things like that before we even knew what our budget was going to look like, right? We didn't have a fully reforecast budget and certainly not enough knowledge of the situation 6 months from February or March to know what it was going to look like. But we kept cash at the franchisee level as much as possible. Similar to the first pillar, if the stores stayed open and were successful and reopened and had the cash to do that all successfully, then the organization as a whole would be successful. And so we really focused on those couple of things and a couple other smaller ones. in order to make decisions more quickly. And the third thing, which wasn't one of those pillars, but really allowed us to make better decisions more quickly, is we really brought our franchisees, mostly in the form of our advisory council, but also other influential franchisees. We really brought them behind the curtain even more than we ever have. We've always been inclusive and collaborative with our advisory council and with franchisees, but we brought them really inside of our leadership team. And instead of making decisions quickly with the best information possible and then communicating it quickly with our advisory councils, we actually included them in the decision initially. We brought them into the decision and the information we had way earlier than is really comfortable, I think, for a lot of businesses in general and franchisors specifically. But we knew the outcome would be better, and that would generate a lot of trust. We were able to run in parallel in terms of making decisions and then communicating them, rolling them out, and we made better decisions. So as we shut down, immediately went to reopening plans, put in safety procedures, all the things everybody else did. We felt like we were moving just a little bit faster and a little bit more as one, as an organization. And so more than anything now, looking back on it and throughout, it brought the organization together in a time of crisis, right? And that can do a lot of things. It can splinter an organization too. Ours got stronger internally. And we think, you know, those 2 or 3 pillars and the way we interacted with the system had a lot to do with that.
That's great. Meg, how about you?
Yeah, well, our system is a lot smaller than what Angela and Edward and you have, John. I'm really proud of our organization, but we are, you know, 125 stores at this point, really only 2.5 years into business. So we're pretty pumped about how quickly we've grown as a company. Having said that, in 2020, we were 1.5 years old. So you can imagine the fear factor at a corporate level, but even more significantly at a franchisee level, when 90% of our franchisees have been open for less than 12 months. So that is, you know, that is mission critical on so many levels for our franchisees. And, you know, without getting into the details of everything we did, I think the simplest and maybe most significant thing that we did was we sort of took the opportunity to say, okay, you know what, let's start over. Let's really start over. We had, our leadership team had inherited the brand in 2018, and there were a lot of things that we wanted to change and do and improve. And we did that. You know, we didn't ask for that window of time that certainly put so much pressure on everybody. But as Edward was saying, we have, you know, undoubtedly come back not only stronger, but smarter, and our franchisees are doubly and triply trained now. So if you could bring back your franchisees to training, you know, after sending them away 6 years ago, and I'm sure Angela and Edward have people they'd love to retrain, that's what we were able to do. And we just took the whole system and started over. So we're lucky to have that opportunity in the midst of, you know, so many difficulties and so many unlucky things.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. Thanks. Angela?
It's interesting. I can relate to both Edward and Meg. We have 4 brands. One of them, as you know, Anytime Fitness, is near 5,000 locations globally. It is surreal, but all of them were closed at one point in time. When would you ever expect that something like that would happen?
Real.
That week in March will go down in history. Like, it's one of those moments in my life that I'll just remember where I was at every moment that first week in March, or that week in March when everything was closing. So that is one experience. And then we have our boutique fitness experience, which is, we've got a baby brand, 8 units strong at the time, which was primarily owned, Base Camp Fitness, by us, mostly corporate, primarily in California and Minnesota, California being quite hard hit with closures and with the pandemic. And then we had the Bar Method, which is a brand we acquired in late 2019. So it was very new to us. And so they're just going through transition as franchisees to a new organization. And then COVID, and that brand is really geographically centralized on the East Coast and the West Coast. So again, of all of our brands, the Bar Method was the hardest hit and impacted by the pandemic. And then we have Waxing the City, a personal care business that was the last to close and the first to open, and has rebounded fastest from by comparison. And so as an organization, we did things a little differently based on each individual scenario, but we really doubled down on focusing on supporting our franchisees with the things that they needed to, the real estate negotiations with their landlord, the financial updates. It was so hard to make sense of PPP early on, and the EIDL loans, and all of that was really complicated for these small business owners. And wow, I can't imagine having been a small business owner outside of a franchise, though, you guys. The support that they had access to, we did everything that we possibly could. Not to mention, Meg, to your point, sort of doubling down on our brands. Who are they, and where are we going with them, and continuing that forward momentum as much as we could. So not getting sort of lost in the spiral of the pandemic and super short-sighted, although we needed to deal with that fire in front of us, always keeping an eye on the future and where we were going, and taking steps forward as well in that direction. So we are not, to this day, fully open in all of our businesses. We still have boutique business that is, not at Bar Method is at 83% as it stands right now. Base Camp is 100% open, but their capacity restrictions at 10% to 50%. So really, it has been a dealer's choice kind of scenario here, and I'm just grateful that on behalf of our franchisees, that they're part of a franchise, and that they had access to each other, and they had access to all of us working on a day-to-day basis on their behalf.
Yeah, that's great. Ours was a similar journey, right? January, February last year, where we were comping double digit over what was a record January and February of the prior year. We actually, all of our spas closed, I think March 18th. We made a decision to close ahead of the jurisdictional mandate because of the really close nature of our core modalities. Every spa in the system was closed for about 8 weeks. And then based on jurisdictional mandate, we began to reopen at that point. We used that period to put a significant amount of protocols and safety protocols and sanitation protocols in place so that we would be prepared to reopen. That gave us the opportunity to redeploy our support resources, both on the development side and on the operation side, to help our franchisees with things like lease negotiations and PPP. We had sort of a asymmetrical recovery in that, jurisdictional mandates eased at a sort of differing pace. And on top of it, we weren't available to execute on all of our core modalities equally. For example, the state of Pennsylvania reopened in, I think, early June for massage, but we weren't able to start doing skincare services until October. A third of our business is skincare. So even though we were open for massage, it actually hurt us significantly. We saw that nice little bump in the early part of the fall as things looked like they were going to turn. And then obviously it crashed again in the fall. Our gift card business has been hurt probably most significantly. It was the slowest to recover. However, our Canadian business, we have 34 spas in Canada, and just yesterday we're, smacked down again with another, emergency stay-at-home provision. So we are fortunate, right? We're back to, we're almost all the way back to 2019 levels, and in some parts of the business we're comping above. But our journeys are all relatively similar in that, we had that sounds like everybody was doing really well pre. Intra was just a disaster, but it gave us the opportunity as management teams and as organizations to really forge who we were going to be moving forward. With that in mind, who we're going to be moving forward, one of the things that it would be great to talk about are some of the things that you've done operationally as a result of the pandemic and all of the jurisdictional mandates, and really think about it two ways, or talk about it two ways: those that you'll keep and those that you will move away from as we get back to a full recovery. And Angela, if you wouldn't mind jumping in first on this one.
Sure. I spoke to this a little bit, leaned in here a little bit earlier. So Anytime Fitness as a brand, and that's the brand upon which Self Esteem Brands was founded. So it has always been about meeting consumers where they were, recognizing that people had individualized routines, and holding operating hours and designing the business model to serve them. And then we evolved into self-esteem brands, which is really, we're working to improve the self-esteem of the world, now recognizing even more than ever that is, as Meg said earlier, a holistic experience. It's not just about physical, what you see on the outside, but what's happening on the inside. And so part of what we did, like everybody, with that in mind, part of what we did, like everybody, when the pandemic hit, is we pivoted immediately to a digital or a virtual experience for our consumers. And as you can imagine, that digital experience is here to stay. More than 60% of fitness consumers say they want to continue to use digital. We just did a survey in the BAR method. This is interesting because prior to the pandemic, almost 0% of our BAR method members used a digital fitness product at all, any product, Peloton or really anything, and they weren't interested in it. They were very much a studio consumer. And now in the research that we've been doing, we are seeing that 20% of them intend to use virtual only. And although we're going to get about 50% that want to primarily be in the studio, there is still that virtual component. So I expect that to stay. But again, like I said earlier, it's not just about offering a digital experience or a virtual class. Either it's on demand or live stream. That's one thing, but that's almost table stakes at this point. I think digital needs to be intersect with this holistic wellness concept. And we need to be thinking about how we meet our consumers where they are with a personalized experience that is not just about their physical fitness, but also about their mental and emotional well-being. And so thinking about that staying, like I said earlier, prior to the pandemic, we might have prioritized innovating on the products and services in service of the club or studio experience. And I think moving forward, what you'll see is more of a prioritization of the omni-channel or the dual experience and how they serve one another. As for things that we probably won't continue, operationally, we had to put some limits on how many people could be in our workout centers and workout rooms. And in some of our brands, we depend on sharing equipment. And as the pandemic subsides and people become more comfortable, obviously our hope is that we can continue to have more people experience class together and to continue to utilize the equipment to its fullest potential.
That's great. Meg, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Our business is obviously a one-to-one service, so it's important for us to maintain and keep everybody comfortable in our salons. One of the things that we changed as a result of COVID that we will continue is to really adjust how we were training our stylists. The precision of the craft and the artistry, honestly, of their craft is something that, for many years, our founder and all of us have been focused on that hands-on element, which is still so critical to a differentiation point for our business. But we can also augment that and include our stylists in more educational forums that we designed and developed, really quickly online, and maybe would give ourselves a B+ for the first iterations. But in recognizing, just how incredible those classes were and how well received they were, we've now upped the ante and just continue to build in that area. I would say another area of emphasis, and this is always a sensitive one in franchising, but is really putting more and more focus on our employees within our franchisee network. We started a full initiative on Culture Club to really engage our employees better, make sure that they're happier with their positions, with their career development. A lot of that has been done online, surveys, communities, Facebook communities, and so forth. And we're just pushing into that because our employees are our most valuable asset, and we want to make sure that they're enjoying their career and their outlook at the Lash Lounge. So that's something that we're going to continue to do and do differently and do, just not make apologies for doing it. It's something so important. What I think we will go back to doing that we stopped was travel. Of course, I know all of us were looking at our P&Ls and kind of grateful that there was a place we were saving money because we weren't all in planes. That's not a place that I want to continue to save money in the future. because of the reason I stated earlier, the relationship aspect, the personal connection aspect of this business is not just in the service we provide to our guests and to our members, but it's also the service that we provide as the CEO, as the FBM, as the stylist trainer to our franchisees and their employees. And it's our duty and our obligation to meet them where they are, in their salon, in their shop, and provide that face-to-face encouragement and the relationship that they deserve as franchisees. So we're going to get back out on the road, we're going to travel safely, and we're going to make sure that we're encouraging those really, really strong relationships.
So I want to come back. There's actually two threads I want to pull on. I want Ember to talk for a second, but I want to come back to something Angela said. I want to come back to something you just said, Meg. What I'm really interested in is the perspective of the two constituencies that you referenced on these changes moving forward. So, Ember, why don't you jump in, and I'll come back to you guys.
Yeah, I think Angela and Meg, I think y'all hit some really great points there. We saw even in the worst of it, and obviously there were, as mentioned, fires to fight and things to solve in the short term. We saw a lot of silver linings in the situation. Any disruption, just fundamentally and objectively, disruption creates opportunities, and everybody was in the same boat, right? Within an industry anyways. So if we looked at it, if we handle things a little bit better than the next organization, then the net of this is a competitive advantage, right? And so there's a lot of things that we saw as opportunities. The speed at which we realized we could move if we absolutely had to. I said, hey, like let's as a team just keep moving this fast. Well, no, maybe 75% this fast would be great. But things like that, a lot of things that would have taken longer. We obviously virtual communication, a lot of the efficiencies, some of the projects that we prioritized versus deprioritized, and the ability to do more with less, I think were all great things. The omni-channel is great. I think you used to think of omni-channel as retail, like a Walmart or a Target, where you buy things online and buy things in store. Omni-channel is not just for retail or for products anymore. We have an artificial intelligence project going on, a new learning management system, even thinking about, for us, the angle of digital convenience for franchisees as well as consumers, and for us stylists or for labor, right? And also, we want to get back to more in-person as soon as possible as well, but blend in some of the lessons we learned. So it's combined both ways there.
Great.
That's great. For us, right, so as we got into our reopening protocol, we hired a battery of health experts, and there were two real clear areas that we had an opportunity to address in our reopening protocol. And the first was safety and sanitation guidelines at the spa level. And the second was creating a contactless intake environment where our customers could effectively, book online and go right to the treatment room before they interacted with an individual. We did both of those. We launched them as system-wide, sort of upgrades to the operating system, and they've been both incredibly successful. And I don't believe that we'll go back from either of them. I think they're both really critical. Angela, like you, that leveraging technology and allowing our guests to maintain a digital-first relationship with the brand, particularly as it relates to demand and origination, and some of the more mundane aspects of mundane from a service perspective, but really important from a transaction perspective. Things like booking online, things like checking in, things like doing enhancements or upgrades to the treatments, and then things like checking out and tipping. We've created an environment where all that can be managed digitally, and we will continue to leverage that moving forward. It'll be an important component. As far as things that we will move away from, we were forced to move away from one of the real core elements of our experience, which is the 10 or 15 minutes sometimes that you sit in the spa prior to your treatment that gives you an opportunity to kind of unwind on the way in. And because of all of the protocols that we put in place, we really had to eliminate that. We were trying to limit the number of people in the spas, and we were trying to limit the amount of contact. We're looking forward to putting that back into the service profile. It really is an important component particularly on the massage side. It's a really important component to the overall experience. And so we're looking forward to getting that back in.
Great.
Meg, I want to come back to you first. You talked about travel and putting that back in place. And by the way, couldn't agree with you more. I would extend that to say not just travel, but like regular office hours and, you know, a collaborative office environment. How does your team feel about it? How's your team reacted to it? And what's their perspective on a return to, you know, quote unquote normalcy in that regard?
Yeah, great question, John, because we've talked about our clientele, our members and guests. We've talked about our franchisees and our franchisees' employees, all just so valuable to the success of franchising, also very valuable to everyone who's on this call today, and those who are listening are the teams that we get to work alongside and lead, our corporate teams, so important, and their health and wellness equally important. And I think Edward said, you know, they were working at 125%. Now we want to, you know, dial it back down to 110, but we're capable of so much. We have to slow down a little bit because it's been a lot. But to answer your question directly, we had several of our team members, John, who were traveling as we started to open up in the second half of 2020. We were going out to ensure that the safety protocols were in place, that our stylists were retrained in the craft, that, you know, they'd been sitting at home for 6 months and needed to be brushing up on their skill set. But we kind of one by one made sure that we were having a dialogue with our employee, understanding their safety and health needs, understanding their personal circumstances at home. You know, maybe they live with an elderly parent or care for young children. So we were hyper sensitive, and I think did a very good job of being conscientious of different people's needs. I will say that as we're getting closer to the reopening, and I think we're all eager to get back to connecting. You know, most of us have jobs where we want to be sitting with someone else talking. I share an office with one of my colleagues, and I love that. We also have to balance what still remains is that little bit of fear factor and anxiety among employees. And, you know, I firmly believe the sooner everyone is vaccinated and feels good and comfortable, the better off we'll be. So there's sort of a slow and steady balance to it.
Yeah, that's great. That's I appreciate the answer on that, Meg. Angela, similarly, right, you talked about the role of technology in the business moving forward. This is something we're wrestling with. How do you communicate to I mean, your franchisees? I think their reaction to it might be one reaction, but how do you communicate to the broader team that one of your stated goals is to, in a sense, obviate their role?
So I don't know that we look at it that way. It's a great question. I think about this a little bit like I think about hairstylists and service providers in the beauty industry and how technology can serve them in their role. It's maybe less obvious that it's going to replace them than a fitness-based experience. But really, truly, the differentiator for our fitness brands and really for fitness in general is around the ability to coach, support, and design an experience that meets the unique needs of an individual. And so the technology itself needs to be designed to serve that process. That's not a bot process, like bot it is, or a chat feature. That's not going to make it. That's not going to create the point of difference for the consumer. It's going to have to be fueled by a human. And so as we're designing and thinking about technology in service of our brands and our target consumer and what they're looking for from us, it isn't about technology alone. It is about technology and that experience that is in the bricks and mortar club or studio, and how those two things come together, and how we make a personal trainer's job easier. Like you guys talked about that, you know, Ed, I think you mentioned that. How do you make your hairstylist job easier? How do you help serve them the information about their consumer that's going to help them make the most unique recommendation and best serve and coach that consumer? So
right.
That's how we think about it. That's how we talk about it. And really that's how we focus on building the technology.
That's great, Angela, thanks. One last follow-up question, and then we'll go to what is our kind of last plan question before we open it up for Q&A. Edward, you talked about that the pandemic gave you the license, or perhaps even the mandate, these are my words, not yours, but license or the mandate to go fast and to do more with less. now that we're well out of the triage portion, and hopefully we're going to stay out of the triage portion. How do you manage that back, right? So we all have boards, we may have sponsors who have looked at the way that we've managed these businesses over the last year, and said, and may love the efficiency, right? How do you walk that mandate or that license back a bit so that you are getting sort of the best out of your team without overstressing them? And that includes your franchisees and their teams.
Yeah, I think I think there's some really interesting angles there, and I think it's all about, very similar to Angela's point at the store level, making sure you're explaining the win-win behind things, right? And whether it's in the store, helping, for example, as labor is difficult for pretty much everybody right now, I think, over time, one of our stated goals is to help our stylists be more productive, right? And it's not because, we want to turn them, mechanize them or turn them into some, impersonal situation or push them in an impersonal situation. It's because you have the opportunity to make more money, right? Would you rather be making commissions and tips or spending time checking clients in and out when a tablet can do that, right? So it's really important to explain the win-win behind these things versus just shove a computer in somebody's face and tell them to work faster, right? And I think at a little bit higher level or broader level, perhaps, I think the concepts will carry over, even though we're gonna try our best not to be working at 125% and pushing in that way. That was a true external crisis, and there's a big difference between a contrived crisis and a real one, right? In a real crisis, you can bring people together and go 125% and it works. In a contrived crisis, it's pretty easy to see through that. It's just not going to work the same. That's not really an option in my mind. But I think the concept of build and iterate is something that has really come out of this that will be valuable for everybody, in that we launched things during or right after shutdown that we knew ahead of time weren't going to be perfect to the standard we'd usually build them, like our virtual training programs, right? And it was more acceptable that it wasn't perfect when it was rolled out. I think that concept has huge value in all of our organizations, that as long as we're all on the same page that something is not, we probably don't want to build and iterate with a payroll system or something, right? But with a lot of programs, it's completely acceptable. And that concept in general, I think, is more accepted right now. And I think also same concept as I mentioned with, in our case, hairstylists, with anybody else. Would you rather be doing the admin type activities, or would you rather be focused on higher value activities, higher impact activities? And so the second concept, I think, that comes from it that can be held onto for a lot longer is the concept of the don't do list, right? Or the things that, why were we doing those things in the first place? It's not that I want you to work, 20 more hours a week. Is maybe we were doing some things before that nobody needed to be doing. And wouldn't it be better if we just stopped doing the lower value things and prioritized a little bit better? So I think a couple concepts in a broader sense that are more acceptable and more understood now than they were before and will last forever.
Yeah, but all of us have been in franchising for a long time. The go fast and iterate paradigm is like antithetical, right? Like, I mean, that's just from a franchisor or franchisee perspective, it's dogma that you don't do that. But the nature of the last 12 months has sort of created it. And personally, I think it's a positive. Now we're in the middle of a POS upgrade system wide. My franchisees would probably not agree with, go fast and iterate, but that's a different topic. So
no one ever does with the POS system, John. You're not alone.
Yeah. So we actually have 3 last questions. And so there's 3 panelists that aren't a moderator. So you each will have one of these last questions. Edward, I'll start with you. How are your franchisees responding coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, as an organization, we came through it really strong. I was really proud and quite frankly grateful for our franchisee community in the way they came together, helped each other, supported us. Our advisory council was very much, in the fight with us, and a lot of alignment, a lot of good things there. One of the keys then and now is we're big on kind of one pagers. If I can do anything on one page, I will. mid-crisis, so it's probably June, we always do an annual focus. It's a one-pager of the whole system. We did an annual refocus, and it was a one-pager of the core concepts that were the most important things you could do with the least amount of effort that would get you through the best, right? And the concept there is very relevant to the concept now. That's an extreme example, but I think it brings the point to light well, is you have to have a rallying cry of some sort, right? You have to have a purpose, right? Just don't collapse is kind of hard to get your arms around and be positive about, but controlling your controllables is something that's, and then identifying what are those controllables that you can handle and influence your own environment is empowering, right? So we did that then, we continue to do that now. And so I think having a clear vision, I think it's more important than ever to have a 1, 3, 5, if you think you can do a 10-year strategy, great, whatever the time frame is, but some sort of long-term vision, even if it doesn't have a number of years to it, kind of a medium term, and then what are we doing like right now to move in that direction? I think that's very empowering to the franchisees and the franchisee community. Internal, what we call our support team, I think it's empowering there. And it gives everybody not only something to focus on, but a lot of confidence, right, in the system and what they've bought into. It's their life savings in many cases, right? They need to have that confidence. They deserve to have that confidence. And with, a little bit more communication, more planning, we can give it to them. I think overall, the big red flag for us is people are very optimistic. And the franchise community is good. We're aligned, we're communicating, but there's a lot of fatigue right now. It's been a year in. I'm feeling a little myself. I know some of our team is, our franchisees definitely are. We knew this would be the case because business people want to tackle a problem, solve it, and move to the next problem. And this problem isn't that in that framework, right? So there's just a lot of fatigue right now, even of the very successful franchisees, even internally. And so I think balancing the motivation and the here's the next thing to tackle with we understand you're tired and giving people a little breathing room as well, that balance is going to be really important.
Yeah, that's great, Edward. So Angela, what do you foresee derailing any of the expectations you have for 2021, and what are you doing to mitigate that?
This kind of came up a little bit earlier, and I'll credit for Meg for bringing it up first. Honestly, the thing that comes to mind for me first here is talent. I was listening to CNBC this morning, and there's a new Microsoft study out that says that 41% of the global workforce is considering a move this year out from their current employer. So yeah. I really think that there's a war for talent out there, and that impacts us on the front line. It also impacts us from a corporate perspective as we're losing or potentially needing to replace top talent in our organization. Couple that with the fact that people can work from anywhere now. So really, it is more than ever, it is important for us to be thinking about and listening to not only our consumer, but to our employees, and not just listening to them, but actioning on what they need. And part of that is what Edward just talked about, and what you brought up, John, around how do you sort of pull back a little bit and consider how the degree of overwhelm that people have right now because of the workload that they're carrying or because of their own personal and financial situation, and then how do you action on that? So we are actively talking about this year as being mainly remote for our workforce here in the HQ offices, flexing as much as we can as we get closer to the fall, and then maintaining some sort of a hybrid environment into the future, like many companies are, but that's just one decision of many that have to happen here now. And I really just, if there's anything that keeps me up at night, it is retaining our talent in this organization, yeah, and improving their experience so that they can deliver their best work while they're here.
Yeah, layer over that compensation inflation, right? Where, it's real, we see it, and that 40, I hadn't seen the Microsoft study. 41% is pretty sobering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Meg, how do you view the overall economic recovery of the franchising industry coming out of the pandemic?
Well, I'll kind of layer on to what Angela said there. So many points she made, just absolutely excellent in terms of the workforce and the change and the adaptation that we need to have as employers. At the same time, a lot of those changes are also really interesting demarcations for the future of franchising. So if you might have found yourself, COVID quarantining in a state you never lived in before, and now you're thinking, gosh, I might just move there. The opportunity to move there in so many ways is to identify a franchise. So I am very bullish on taking care of our employees. That really is something that I take the greatest amount of pride in. And at the same time, I'm also really excited about the idea that franchising as an industry is going to see a real bounce back, maybe even a surge in terms of the number of people who are interested in being in business for themselves, but not by themselves, and getting into franchising in general. I know for us, we've never seen such a madness in our pipeline, and I almost feel ashamed to say that in some cases, because it's just incredible, the interest in the category and the service, and that's a thrill for me. I think we are all part of such an incredible segment of business that empowers people, that provides services and outlets for great careers, for great business ownership, and for the opportunity for people to make change when they're ready to make that change. So I'm extremely excited about what I foresee as an even brighter future for franchising. Just really thrilled about what that outlook looks like.
That's great, Meg. That's awesome. So we are 3 minutes from the end. We went well past our 40-minute mark. So Meg, I think you're safe.
Let's summarize the labor discussion. It's going to be hard to hire, really hard to hire for 6 months, pretty hard to hire for 12 months, and then we'll see, right? Is that a good summary of the labor?
And then all bets are off.
Wanted to definitely.
Yeah. So I have actually one more question on the. And sorry, Paul, but this is something I wanted to.
That's fine.
I ask of the group.
Go ahead, guys. This is awesome.
How is everybody feeling about the impact of mandatory, non-mandatory vaccination on really three constituencies, right? Your consumers, your unit level employees, and then your company employees. And how are you thinking about it in terms of like differences in states, but I guess high level, mandatory versus non-mandatory?
I'd love to chime in on this one, John, because I've had the opportunity in the last couple of days to work with some of Paul's colleagues on a few things that are happening at the White House level of, hey, are there ways to incentivize encouraging people to get vaccines? So I don't have to be transparent about my politics to say here, I cannot wait for everybody to get vaccinated. We need to believe in this. Science rules. Get yourself out there and take care of yourself. And let's express some gratitude for our government for moving so quickly. The way in which we can do that as business owners, whether it's encouraging our employees or our corporate employees or even our guests, there's this concept of, and I know it's highly political, but this concept of encouraging people to have a vaccination identification, right? What would that look like? And my belief is, and if Suzanne or some of the other IFA people were on the line here, they've already heard this from me a bunch of times. If that were branded properly and doesn't use the word vaccine, and maybe doesn't use the word White House, right? But it's something like, right. I'd love to call it the MVP, like my vaccine pin. If people are encouraged to have that MVP number when they come to Angela's Gym or Edwards Super Clips, perhaps that franchisee is saying, hey, do you have your MVP number? I'll give you a 5% discount or a 2% discount or $1 off your pizza. If we can all, as business owners, get behind something that encourages the people across this country to consider getting this vaccine, to keep all of our businesses open, to keep all of our employees employed, and most of all, to keep us all safe, wouldn't we do that? I would love to give a discount of service at the Lash Lounge, and our franchisees would sign up for it if they knew their employees were less likely to get sick, and they knew that the guests coming in were less likely to pass on something. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I'm obviously very excited about this subject, so I had to use that minute to get it in there, or inject it, and that pun was intended.
Wow. And Meg and I didn't even talk about this beforehand, but you kind of teed that one up perfect. So we're right at the 3 o'clock mark. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Paul, were there any questions that came in that you feel like the panel's got to address?
Not necessarily. And what we'll do is we'll share these questions with all you guys. So Caitlin will send these out to you guys. There are a couple of good questions in there that I think, like Kevin, Rebecca had a couple of questions, but I think it's something you guys could address offline. So okay. This was an amazing, you guys did a great job, and I can't thank you all enough for your thought leadership and just, for all of the support you always continuously give IFA. So thank you guys. Just an amazing webinar today. So thank you. So on that note, John, thank you. Edward, Meg, Angela, thank you very much. Everybody who participated today, thank you. A reminder, we did record today's webinar. It will be made available later this evening on community.franchise.org. And we do have a couple more sector webinars coming up, and those are listed right here. So if you feel free to join us on the next three webinars coming up. And on that note, listen, guys, thank you very much. Excellent webinar today. Can't thank you
Thanks,
enough.
Paul. Thanks, John. You did a great
Good
job.
evening, everyone.
Thanks,
Stay
John.
well. Bye now.
Thanks, guys.
See you.